Hi there, welcome to 3164. I'm Dr. Ang, and I am going to be connecting with you on aspects related to legal theories of nursing practice. So this is August 24th, first day of class of fall semester 2020. So welcome back to TU, the School of Nursing, and welcome to 3164. So we're going to dive into legal theories of nursing practice. You will find under the course content, under the tab, you can look and see this folder. There are several resources under there that I find very beneficial, things that you should at least make yourself aware of, and just dive into them and become familiar with them. You don't have to do a deep dive, but just more or less, I like to reference it. You'll know from my lectures what's nice to know and then what's need to know information. And you do need to know where these resources are and how to access them. And they have a lot of nice to know information. You don't necessarily need to take a deep dive as far as for purposes of the exam, but I'll point out some things that would be of more importance that would be worth your time. Spending a little bit more diving into that information as we go. So we'll get started. I am going to be referencing my PowerPoint, and I will do some voiceover PowerPoints as we go where I actually show the PowerPoints, but for sake of this lecture and I'm spinning this out as quickly as I can, I want to make sure that when we're in class, we have time for our orientation to both 3154 and 3164. So I'm devoting that time to make sure that we address, answer any questions and address any concerns. So I'm gonna fire this out as quickly as I can. So if you pull up your PowerPoint as you're listening to this, you'll be able to follow along with me. But for futures, I'll just probably voice it over. I wanted to be kind of face-to-face and do it this way for this week. But for future ones, you'll just hear my voice going with a overview of the PowerPoint. So here we go. We'll go ahead and get started. Now you'll see the readings in Gito, and then also these references, as I was mentioning, the websites, Nursing OK. The NCSBN is a very beneficial website as well. Just hop on there and get familiar with that. There's a lot of great resources. A lot of things that you're going to do moving through nursing school and then on into your profession, you're going to want to have these resources at your fingertips. So the sooner you become familiar with them and know they're available, the better off that you'll be. So look at both of those. And then the objectives. So legal. We're going to analyze the legal implications for standard of nursing practice. So you're becoming a nurse, you're learning all these skills, you're getting a great skill set and a knowledge base. But then as you transition into the profession, how do you apply the standard of nursing practice? Like what's expected of you? What guidelines should you practice within? We're gonna touch base on all of those. And then who decides that? Is that up to the facility you work in? Is that a personal decision, or is there a more hierarchy that is gonna determine that for you? And then 2, define and discuss the following legal theories associated with defense. Hopefully not. You won't become involved with a legal suit, but if you are, we're going to kind of dive into that and peel back that onion and see what that looks like and what the different levels are of a legal implications and how they will impact your nursing license and your nursing practice. So you'll see their legal theories. You can see their intentional or quasi-intentional torts. You can see the different examples, and then also the legal defense, intentional or quasi-intentional. We'll go through those, but paying attention, not just knowing the definitions, but knowing what would fall under which framework. So why are there laws regulating nursing? Like, why do we have laws to regulate our nursing practice? Obviously, there's a risk of harm. We are doing more and more very skill set based different skills that there's a lot of risk involved. If we do not stay as competent practicing nurses, there are a lot of things that we would not want someone doing to us if they're not competent in those areas. So we know right off the bat, being in the healthcare system and practicing as a nurse, there is a risk for harm. So that's one reason why there are laws regulating nursing. And then protecting the citizens, since there is a risk. We want to know if we're the most trusted profession. We stay right at the top of the list for most trusted profession. And why is that? Because we realize that there is an incredible responsibility to protect citizens. When someone comes in to access health care, we want to make sure that we are delivering through competent nurses. We are delivering appropriate health care that is safe and effective to the best of our ability. So protecting citizens and avoiding the risk of harm. And not only that, but now we're going to get a little selfish. See the selfish side. We want to protect those that are in our care, protect those citizens, and eliminate, to the best of our ability, a risk for harm. But then on the other hand, we want to protect ourselves and the nursing license that we are working so hard for. You know more than anyone how difficult and challenging it is to obtain this nursing license. This is the livelihood for not only yourself, but your family or those that are counting on you. So we want to protect that nursing license. So we're going to look at the two folds of that, protecting others as well as, it's okay, we want to protect ourselves. So we want to look out for ourselves in that as we practice as competent nurses. So what are the laws related to nursing? So basically the guidelines, I like to think of it as like the Bible of nursing or nursing healthcare and how we function within the healthcare system, is the Nurse Practice Act. So NPA. The areas of this, and you can look, where is this found? I think we'll get into this on another slide, but if you go on to the OBN website, hopefully you're familiar with that. If you're not, go ahead and pull that up, because you can see the Nurse Practice Act is on there. You can Google it very quickly. You can obtain that. I'll have a link associated, as well as in the resources of Harvey, you can find this. But very important that you find out, as you're trained, whichever school of nursing that nurses are trained in, then you go out and practice. Once you obtain that nursing license, you need to know where those specific guidelines are, and that is the Nurse Practice Act. Authority, power, and composition of a board of nursing, education program standards, standards and scope of nursing practice, types and titles and licenses, all of this fall under the NPA, requirements for licensure, groups for disciplinary action, other violations, and possible remedies. So not only are we the authority and the power for the Board of Nursing, so state boards of nursing, the education program standards, there is a lot that we do here at TU to make sure all the boxes are checked and everything is in place to deliver a competent nursing program to you, to make sure this is not just, this is how we feel we should do it at TU. We are answering also to a higher body, which would be the Board of Nursing. So this makes sure that the school of nursing that you're going into, that you're obtaining that license from, that we have checked all the boxes. And then as you become a nurse, also the standards and scope of your nursing practice as you function out in the healthcare system. So you'll know what falls underneath my roles and responsibilities as a nurse, and what is it okay to say, I'm sorry, that's not in my scope of practice. Types and titles, we're moving into we're growing, ever growing as a profession. So now we have a lot more advanced degrees that we are adding to the traditional bedside nurse. So along with that, the roles and responsibilities underneath each of those licenses has to be monitored and maintained as well. And then requirements for licensure, how many clinical hours? This is something that we're seeing right now a lot of, because there's a lot of changes in this pandemic that we are currently in. So what do we do now when it's a little bit more challenging to obtain clinical hours? So that we work within the Board of Nursing and try to determine what is going to be acceptable, what are alternatives. So we're working hand in hand to make sure that we maintain that level of expertise and education that we need to send out competent nurses to the bedside. Then grounds for disciplinary action and other violations, and then what are the possibilities for that nurse to remedy that situation to get back to the bedside or clinical setting wherever they may be practicing. So that last one is a big one. So what would be grounds to lose your license or be suspended, as well as what would qualify as an actual violation that could lead to that, and then what would be the possible remedies that you would need to do. Is it more contact hours? Is it just whatever it is? Does it fall within that criminal guidelines, or is this something that could have potentially been a lot worse, so there just needs to be some disciplinary action moving forward? All would fall underneath the MPA. Then again, as the last one we're popping up is the Board of Nursing. There's a Board of Nursing for each of the states. So as far as Oklahoma here, we have the Oklahoma Board of Nursing. And if you pull up that website, look on the left-hand column, and you can pull up the different regulations here and how they apply to us in Oklahoma. Wherever you happen to plan to practice after graduation, you would want to be familiar with that Board of Nursing as well. But these, just know, the MPA and the Board of Nursing, so for Oklahoma, the OBN, Oklahoma Board of Nursing, are the ones that set the laws related to nursing in our state. So follow along with those and maintain. Why does a nurse need to know about these, specifically the MPA or the Oklahoma Board of Nursing? Why would we need to know? Because ignorance of the law is never an excuse. It is never appropriate to say that I didn't know. I didn't realize that was not within my scope of practice. I didn't realize that I should have done this or I shouldn't have done that. It's never an excuse to say I didn't know or to claim ignorance. So we need to be responsible and maintain following those guidelines and be made aware of any changes or updates or addendums that come to the MPA or Oklahoma Board of Nursing. They're usually pretty good about making us aware of those, as well as the institution that you work in, where you're employed, will make you aware of if there's a change in scope of practice, for example. So that's a question when you go in for an interview. It's a good thing to ask. When they say, now do you have any questions for us? Usually that's towards the end of the interview, and you may say no because you're just trying to, exit and be done with the situation. But that's a good time to say, if there are changes to the MPA, Oklahoma Board of Nursing, if they make any changes, how do you communicate those changes to your nurses? Is that something that's done through an in-service? Is that something I'm expected to do on my own? And most of the larger institutions have this down. They want you to be aware, and they will inform you of these. But ultimately, it is, as a practicing nurse, it's going to be your responsibility to stay educated and in the know. So continuing that education as you go throughout, well after graduation, is going to be critical. History of the Nurse Practice Acts. Pre-Industrial Revolution. This slide is some nice to know information. I'm not going to hit heavily on this, but 1903, North Carolina, you can see, was the first. 1970s, all states required licensure for registered and practical nurses. Which state held the first registration law? So who required, we went from just people caring for friends and family at the bedside, and you would take the one that seemed to be the most competent or compassionate, and they functioned kind of in the role of a nurse, to we said, okay, this is an actual profession, and we need to have guidelines, and we're going to have an actual registration that has to be obtained in order for someone to function in the role as a nurse. And which state held the first actual registered nurse, as we mentioned? It was in 1903, in North Carolina was the first. Board of Nursing duties, as we mentioned, we kind of hit MPA. Now we're going to switch over here to Board of Nursing. Hiring obviously of their own employees, making, adopting, amending, repealing, and enforcing the rules of nurses within the state, setting nurse education standards, fees for licensure, performing criminal background checks. We all have to do that for nursing school, faculty, all nurses functioning in this role have to go through this process. And who does that? That's the Oklahoma Board of Nursing. Licensure qualified applicants, maintaining database of licensure, all of this when you plug in to see if you're active or if you need to renew, all that is maintained in their database, and that is the OBN that does that. Ensuring continuing competence. Who sets the guidelines? If you've ever wondered, what if I get out of nursing school, I stop to have a family, a major life event, another life event comes into play, and I'm not able to work for a period of time. At what period of time can you go before you lapse and have to either take more coursework, you have to go back and sit for an exam again? You're going to want to know these guidelines, and who sets these guidelines? But the Board of Nursing. Implementing discipline processes, regulating unlicensed assistive personnel. That's one that people don't often realize is also in there, but it's all those people that you as a nurse may delegate to. You want to make sure that we're working hand in hand, and the OBN is going to make sure that you as a nurse know that you are ultimately responsible. Even if you delegate, you are ultimately responsible for that task. Grounds for disciplinary action. I apologize that a lot of this is just, there's a lot of writings to read throughout these slides, but just kind of hitting the high points for you. Practice related, you can read the in-depths of these. Drug related, boundary violations, sexual misconduct, abuse, fraud, positive criminal background checks. These are all things where there's disciplinary action or possible remedies that's falling underneath this, and you can read through those and see a little closer. This is just good information for you to know, because you're going to have to, let's say you have something in your past. Is it always going to follow you? Yes, unfortunately it is. Do I need to report something? Or maybe they don't need to know about that because that's been, 5 years. Do I need to pull that through if I was arrested for something that is completely unrelated to healthcare in my practice as a nurse? Do I need to report that? And the answer generally is going to be yes, because you don't want the Oklahoma Board of Nursing to find out something about you that you didn't self-reveal yourself. So that's a good rule of thumb to think about. We don't need to hide things. They're generally going to be, if you're upfront, and then give you a place to explain that. Often I'll tell students that come and seek this little advice from me. Go ahead and tell exactly what it was and what you learned from it and how you've ensured that you're not going to go down that path again. That's generally what they're going to want to see. But trying to sweep it under the rug and hope that they don't discover it is never recommended. So, what is a tort? In general, a tort is anything that would land you as a nurse in court. So specifically, a wrongful act, damage, injury committed against a person or person's property. Notice that it's not just the injury that occurs to a person, it can also be any wrongful act against a person's property. Assume cause and effect. Focus will be on the fault. So you have to be able to connect the cause and effect. What I did as a nurse was negligent and directly caused the effect. Types of torts: negligence, intentional torts, quasi-intentional torts, and then strict liability. Primarily, we're going to be focused on negligence here, but as we move through here, you're going to see that some things are intentional and some things I didn't mean for that to happen, but that was the result of what I did. So that's a big factor in legal, was the intention there? Obviously, could it have been avoided in a lot of cases? Maybe, yes, it could have, but I did this not thinking through the end result. It was not my intention to cause harm, but harm was the end result of an action that I did. So we'll dive into that a little bit as well. Negligence is generally non-intentional. Generally non-intentional. Negligence occurs when the nurse fails to follow established policies, procedures, and a standard of care in the same manner as another reasonable nurse would in the same situation. So if what I do causes harm, they're going to, in a legal suit, they're going to look and see what would another reasonable or prudent nurse have done in the same situation. And they're going to compare that to several other nurses in the same situation. What would be expected of that nurse? Because in some situations, there may be a situation where you put your patient into bed and you're laying them down, getting them comfortable, then you're short-staffed, someone falls in the hallway or someone goes into cardiac arrest in the hallway, you turn to help that person. In the meantime, your patient falls out of bed. Now you've caused harm here, but you were also trying to help here. If they're short-staffed, there's a lot of pieces in a case like that that you could pull from and say, I was not trying to hurt this patient clearly, but if you're just looking at that in of itself, why didn't you pull the rail up? Yes, I should have pulled the rail up, but we're going to pull also the facts of the fact that I was also trying to help someone that was in distress here as well. So this is just an example of how it's not always just a cut and dry, you didn't pull up the rail, therefore you caused injury. That was neglect. You fall into the category of nurse negligence. Now you should have your license revoked. That's not necessarily the case. But if you just looked at a tiny piece of the pie, that may appear to be that. So just giving you an example here. Something unrelated, you can see that example on here. Not a medical example, but you own a home, a roof tile falls off the roof of your house and hits a pedestrian. Obviously, you didn't mean for that to happen, but yet you would technically be at fault. So we would be looking, was there intent there? No, I did not intend for someone to get hurt, but yet I'm still responsible for that. This case also would be have several tiles fell off and I have just refused to fix it. Was I being responsible in this situation? I'm not going to go too deep into that because it's not a healthcare example, but just kind of gives you an idea. Intentional tort is a willful act that violates another's rights or property. These are things that are willful, they are intentional, and could have been avoided. So these are instances and examples that, as a nurse, if you qualify in any of these, it's going to be very hard to pull yourself away and claim any innocence in this, because these are willful acts or intentional torts. They are usually slam dunks in the legal system if you fall into one of these categories. Assault, battery, conversion of property, trespassing, emotional distress, false imprisonment, and fraud. So clearly you see examples of fraud on the news, all kinds of things. You can look at examples of this. But if you hit or strike a patient for any reason, you most likely will be linked to the suit, and you will fall out from underneath the umbrella of arcing of any protection you're going to get from your institution, because there is a legal defense there, but that will also work to, we'll get into that later, but that has a insurance policy, if you will, that will help protect you as an employee if you are within your scope of practice. If you step out in any instance where there is an intentional tort and you willfully, there's really no argument about it, you willfully and intentionally caused one of these violations to someone or their property, then you would be pretty much on your own trying to fight that, and would be very difficult to do. So hitting someone, stealing, this is one that I didn't realize was as big of a deal as it is, but especially in long-term care facilities, or if you have a patient, this is why it's so important to, if you're admitting someone, to let them know you need to keep your valuables at home and or in some type of a locked, in some facilities will have a lockbox or some type of thing. A lot of facilities don't. And if you come in and it's for a procedure, or you're sending your patient down to OR and they're taking their watch and their wedding ring off and they're leaving it on the bedside table. Now the door is going to be open. No one's going to be in there. People are going past left and right. And you will have people in and out of the room while they're gone in their absence. This is why you don't think of this as a typical nursing skill set, but just being responsible and being aware. Hey, to their loved one, you might want to take this with you or put this somewhere else. We don't want to leave this out here. And for sure, if you're the nurse, you're protecting it just so that someone else, maybe it doesn't end up on a lunch tray, or it doesn't end up where someone's cleaning and somehow it disappears and it was either intentionally taken or not. And you sure yourself don't want to think, hey, I've been needing an Apple Watch. I mean, this is, you can justify anything. So you want to stay clear of that, because if you get in with any taking of someone else's property or they lose it. Another thing is eyeglasses. This is just a way to help your patients to be able to protect themselves. Dentures, different things, they're very, very expensive, and it could be a tremendous burden to your patient if they don't have these items. And obviously fraud, anything, even another one I want to hit on there, falsifying documents. Don't chart that you did an assessment that you didn't really do. Don't copy vitals from the nurse before you and just slightly alter them to appear that you took them. That is any false documentation, that is intentional. So don't say you're giving a medication, the patient is asleep, and slip it in your pocket and document that you gave it. All of that seems to be just a given, but when you get busy and you're tired and you're having back-to-back 12-hour shifts, people do things sometimes that they would otherwise not do. So just think through these things and kind of have a game plan for what you would do or not do. It's good to address that, go through that in your mind before you get in that situation. Quasi-intentional torts. Intent to harm may be lacking, but harm still occurs. Action greater than negligence. So invasion of privacy. If you are a nurse or nursing student even, and you have access to Epic, and you go in and you access a patient on another floor, you heard that your, ex-boyfriend is in the hospital, and you go and you access that chart, anything, you give any information out or obtain it even just for yourself that is not directly related to a patient that you're caring for, that is a tort, and that could land you in court. So that is not information, because you have access to it, it is not information that you are privy to. You do not have the right to look at that information for yourself just because you can access Epic. You do not go onto units that you are not assigned to. You don't go look into charts or anything with patients other than the direct patients that you're assigned to. And in a nosy world, and it's on late night shift and someone's asking you a question, it can be tempting to do that. But just know that that is an intentional tort, a wrongful doing that could land you in court if you do that. Defamation, slander, libel. Slander is a spoken word. Libel is something that's written. You want to slander. If you're saying something about someone that could harm their reputation, this could be a coworker, this could be another collaboration with respiratory, physical therapy, the physician, whatever, or about a patient's family. best that you don't even address these things. Only say things as facts as you know it, not what someone has told you, not what you think you heard. If it is not a fact and directly related to the care of that patient, you do not need to be saying it. Okay, and I know that's hard, and we all know that, and how easy it is to gossip and, well, this is what I heard about so-and-so. There is no place for that in healthcare. So just know that as well is, if you try to take down a coworker, that's going to come back to bite you. So definitely slander is a spoken word that is not true, and where you are taking down someone's reputation just off of your spoken word. So be super careful with that. There are a 3 case studies in here. I'm going to buzz past those. They aren't all healthcare related, so it just kind of helps to understand those. Sometimes people have asked and found those helpful. I'll leave them in. You can look through those at your own pace here. Purpose of torts, it's to appease the situation. Someone feels they have been very, very wronged, and they need to have an appeasement, to feel like that they've been heard, that the case has been heard. And even if it doesn't go their way, sometimes people just need to know that they were heard. Compensation, if an actual wrong occurs and this causes me to be out of work and provide for my family, I'm going to need some compensation for that, and that's okay. That's not that I'm trying to get rich quick off of somebody's mistake. There can be some justifiable compensation for a wrongful act being done. Justice, you just want to know that things have been right. Wrongs have been made right. And then deterrence, you just want to see that the right person, if there's someone that is causing negligence, they are functioning with negligence and they're not within their scope of practice, and there is a trail, that trail needs to be stopped before it affects more and more people. So you just want to make sure that these things are addressed. And if it's me and I'm doing something and it is continually causing harm to someone, yes, I do need to have that stopped, where there's not a pattern. And that's why it's important for institutions. If you have nurses on your floor that should be changing out Foleys at a certain routine base, they change them out, whatever, every 4 days, or they're supposed to change it out every 24 hours, and they're going 3 or 4 days, and this is a routine, and you're having people coming back with UTIs, and it's blowing into a big ordeal. This is something that is going to come back then, not only on the nurses that are being negligent, but also the institution that saw a pattern, identified a pattern, but didn't do anything about it. So you're going to find that you get written up, things happen. There are going to be disciplinary actions within an institution as well, to make sure that there aren't patterns that are forming, that are causing negative results for the clients within the care of that institution. There can be product torts, liability, so different things, whether it's a medication. I have a video that I show sometimes. There's been a medication that was, or something that was not packaged, what was packaged correctly, like heparin. And the institution knew that it looked too close. So what they used in the NICU for newborns, very, very fragile newborns, was packaged very similar to heparin for an adult. There were accidents that occurred, and it became a big legal ramifications. And then there was still an institution that knew that the heparin used in the NICU looked very much like an adult. It was coming from pharmacy. It got mixed up, and there were a couple cases where newborns received a heparin dose for an adult. And it wasn't just that it was that specific case. The problem was there had been a recall on this, and this particular institution thought, well, we'll go ahead and use up what we have. And then when the new shipment comes in, obviously then it'll be color-coded differently and we won't have that problem. But knowing it's needed to be pulled from the shelf, they did not do it, and that there was huge ramifications for that institution with that. So if product recalls specifically on car seats, different things, when there's knowingly a problem, it needs to be very well communicated with society on a lot of different levels. Now you'll see it will come across on emails, whether it's phone calls, whether it's on TV, different things. You can even see billboards, whatever. If there's a product that has been recalled, it'll be on commercials. You'll see so many things of how they're trying to get the word out to make the consumer aware, but most importantly, the people that are providing that, whether it's a medication or in this case a car seat, that we get it off the shelf. So if you have that in your medicine cabinet, or that car seat is the car seat that you have buckled in the back of your minivan, you need to be aware, but then we're going to handle it on this side as well and make sure that we're not distributing any more of those, because they can lead to product torts. So nursing torts, professional liability related to role description. Again, what is expected of a nurse? How do we know what's expected of us? I want to function within practice as a nurse, within my scope of practice, but how do I know what that is? And what did we say? That's the Nurse Practice Act. That'll let you know what is responsible for you. So going to the OBN website, if you haven't done that yet, please do that right now. Pull that up. You'll see the star in the circle up there, and then look again on the far left column. Again, general description of scope of practice defines not only how you become an RN, who can educate. It lets us know from TU how are we going to educate to make sure that we have a very high standard of the nurses that graduates that we're putting out there, and then holds all accountable. We know it's going to hold everyone accountable. Will be the Oklahoma Board of Nursing, will be the hierarchy. And even if an institution says, hey, it's okay, and they're getting lax, the Oklahoma Board of Nursing will say, no, not as a practicing nurse within our state, here is the standard, and you will rise up to this regardless of what's expected of you at your institution. A practicing nurse within the state of Oklahoma will rise up to this standard, or you will not practice in our state. So you can get great comfort in that. Not only are we practicing nurses, we are also consumers. So look at it from that angle. Anytime you think, wow, this is a lot of red tape, a lot of regulations, yes, we want that. We want safe healthcare. Nursing standards, guidelines that define practice, you can look through these. Civil law is a duty owed. I'm an RN caring for a patient. That is the key. That is, in civil law, the duty is I am a registered nurse and I have been assigned to this patient. Therefore, I have the duty as a practicing licensed nurse to provide appropriate, responsible care within my scope of practice. And they can trust me knowing that I have been educated appropriately and I am held to a high standard. Therefore, they can trust me in my role to deliver the best possible outcomes that I can. We'll get into a little bit more of that. Joint Commission, we're all familiar with that. These are all regulations that help to maintain the level of health care delivered within our state. State Health Department, you can look through each of these. So nursing negligent torts, these are some examples. I'm a legal nurse consultant. I practice as that in addition to teaching. And I just want to let you know that as I go through these, this is very real. And a lot of them, these are not people setting out to do something wrong. These are people, as if you hear that, there's a song, Slow Fade. It's a slow fade. I started very sharp in here, and then I get in and I see people are cutting corners and seem to be getting away with it. Doesn't seem to be causing them any problems. I don't know that they've hurt any patients, so maybe I'll get a little bit lax. Maybe I'll sit a little bit more. Maybe I won't be quite so prudent with each task that I'm doing. And then you can quickly get into several of these. History taking. When you're supposed to, it's required as a nurse and you're getting a health history. Do you just kind of fill in the blanks based off of what someone else took? You can always look back a little further in the chart and see maybe what someone else wrote, is that going to be okay with you? Or that health history that you record, is that going to be 100% accurate based on what you assess that at that moment? Giving advice, that is not our role. Our role is to provide very research-based information and point back to, you can always go back to the CDC, all these different websites that we have, these governing, not websites, these governing bodies that we have that is evidence-based practice. It's based on research. We do not need to give our opinions and our advice about anything. That is not what we're there for. So we're going to only be giving evidence-based knowledge and presenting that to our patients, but never our advice, not our opinions, regardless of if people ask. Performing an examination, if you say you're doing something, you need to actually do it, and you need to do it thoroughly to the best of your ability as a registered nurse. Performing treatment or a procedure, same thing. Reporting or failing to report. If you have a patient that you have noticed the vital signs are not maintaining stable, but you think, okay, well, I'm just going to run down, cafeteria closes, I need to hurry, I'll be back, then I'll try to get in there. I might just delegate somebody to stick their head in there and just make sure everything's okay, but they're busy too, and I don't know, hopefully everything will be okay. If it worsens or starts to worsen, it probably won't, but if it did, then I'll call the doctor later. And you failed to report that you did notice there was a slight decline, and you had a red flag that was raised, but you didn't report it, and you come back and you notice there's 10 people in the room because the patient coded, you failed to report a decline in that patient's status, and you had a duty to that patient. So there's a breach in care, and now that's a negligent act for you. Testing or failure to report the results of a test. So you get the lab results back on something and you don't notify the doctor. You just throw it in the chart and you don't notify because you're about off your shift. So you'll leave that for the next shift coming after you, and hopefully they'll catch it and let them know. No, that's your responsibility in that moment. And then documentation. Clearly, we beat this over and over and over, but if you don't document it, it wasn't done. If you're pulled into a court scenario at one point and you say, no, I always did that. I definitely did it. I remember doing it. No, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. So make sure you document thoroughly, free from your opinions. Document thoroughly exactly what you have done, and don't document anything that you haven't done, or that I probably should have did this, I didn't, but I'm going to cover it in my documentation. No, it works both ways. Don't document something that you didn't do, and then don't fail to document something that you did do. So make sure you hit that from both sides. Assault, any action that places another in fear of being touched without consent or authority. So assault is that fear of something is going to happen. Battery is it actually happens. The force is actually applied to another. So assault and battery. False imprisonment, unjustifiable detention without legal warrant, or confined. I need to correct that on here. Patient restraints. We got away from this. And you may think this is an outdated slide, like we don't do this anymore, because we all know we don't restrain a patient that does not need to be restrained, but this still happens. So please know that this is here. This is not just restraining with wrist restraints or confining an elderly patient with a vest to a chair so that they don't fall out for their safety. This is also a patient that you could console in other ways, but you are very quick chemically, or to provide a medication to them because it's easier for you on night shift if they sleep. It may be a little more challenging for you if you do things that the family has suggested, like, they like a warm blanket, or they like soothing music, or they like to have this or that. hot tea or these different things that you could do. They're becoming a little agitated, and it may take a little bit more of your time, but that would be in the best interest of the patient. But if you're very quick to, there is a PRN medication, or I can call the doctor and probably get this if I say they're combative, but then if they take that, I won't have to worry about them all night. No, that could be false imprisonment of trying to confine a patient in that manner. That's not in the best outcomes, for the best outcomes of that patient. Okay, intentional infliction of mental distress, humiliation, grief, shame, despair, verbal abuse, threatening. There are bullying, all sense of this. This can go colleague to colleague. This can go, you can talk down to a patient. This goes in long-term care facilities as well. You can talk down to patients, that you can inflict mental distress that will also end up with a tort that could land you in court from doing that. Conversion of property, again, patients' belongings are just that. That's their belongings. Encourage them to take them home. Like for me, I would document patient encouraged to send these items home. Nurse also spoke to patient's spouse or family member to take items home. If you notice that they continue to leave things out, or a wallet or a purse or money, people get very comfortable. Sometimes you can even, family members, a wife visiting a husband can leave her purse just sitting on the bedside table. So these are things I would document that I had that conversation. So if it comes up missing, they're not going to associate that to me, because I was trying to make sure that that was taken care of. Now, I'm not going to take the purse and do something with it to try to help hide it, but I'm going to make sure that they know that information. I'm going to encourage them to take that home, provide them with a bag that they can put their things in, and then encourage the family member to take them home. Or put things, say, Mr. Baker, I'm going to put your glasses and your dentures in the top drawer, and we're just going to close it up so it's not sitting out. So as there's a lot of people that end up staying and waiting in some of our institutions, and they can walk by and you wouldn't maybe intentionally take something, but that does happen. So we want to protect that. So just hitting that again. Invasion of privacy. What do we say with this? Please don't bring your cell phones onto the units. You're in nursing school, that's exciting, but we don't need to get by our patients or whatever. Try to take a selfie with another nursing student, and we have medical records on the wall right behind us. This is an invasion of privacy. Our whole HIPAA, we know about HIPAA. Privacy is a huge, huge topic right now, and can land you a tort that's going to land you in court so quickly. So when we say don't take selfies on the units, it's not because we're not cool and don't want you to have a cool post about what you're doing. We want to protect you, because that is a tort that could land you in court. So please respect privacy. Don't eavesdrop. Again, don't go in someone else's chart. That is not our place. The right to privacy, we know this, go into HIPAA. Again, defamation of character, know the difference. Again, slander, libel. So libel's written. Don't chart something that you did if you didn't. We're going into that again. Slander, spoken. Don't give report of something that you did that you didn't do. Don't gossip. How many times, this is something you're going to see when you go to give off your report. Don't say the crazy family in 204, or this patient is driving me nuts. He kept calling out all night. I don't even think he really has anything. You know, he's just drunk and homeless, and he'll be back next week anyway. So why? No, that is not our role and responsibility as a nurse. We're to provide that care free of judgment. And when you give that report, let the next nurse have an open slate when they approach that person. Don't try to paint this ugly picture, even if that was your experience. That's not helpful. You hopefully are not documenting that, or you're sure to dig a hole for yourself that you're going to fall in. So don't pass that off. Be a positive, fact-based nurse, and that's going to keep you out of trouble. The right to self-determination, informed consent. We can dive in. This is pretty self-explanatory. The nurse's role with this obviously is you can witness this, but explaining the procedure needs to be done by the physician. This cannot be delegated. A physician or a advanced care nurse cannot say to you, hey, can you go in there and explain this and get this consent signed and bring it back to me? No. And if they're coming for the procedure, they're coming to get the patient for a procedure, and right before, the patient looks at you and says, I don't know why I'm getting this, going for this bypass. Why can't I just get a cardiac catheterization? I heard that would be fine. I don't know if I feel comfortable with this. What would you do at that point? You would put on the brakes, call in that physician again, and that this patient still has questions that need answered. That's not my role as a nurse to go over all that, but it is my role as a nurse to be an advocate for that patient. And even though they signed a consent, they clearly don't know the options and all the pros and cons of this. So that would be my role. I would be witnessing and advocating for, witnessing that signature, and advocating that that patient is in a cognitive state where they can understand, and that the facts on pros and cons have been delivered in a way that they can comprehend. So who can consent? An adult, a parent, a spouse, written durable power of attorney, and then minor in certain cases. You can see if they're financially independent, if they are married, military. Let's see. Implied consent is a patient coming into emergency center needing emergency care. There's an urgent need there, and there will be an implied consent to save this patient. So I'm going to do whatever we need to do to save this patient, even if we don't have a written informed consent sitting here on the top of the chart. Expressed, either oral or written. Written is preferred, but in some cases we're going to need to get an oral consent in a fast for time sensitivity. The right to refuse. Patients will always have the right, if it's for religious, invasion of privacy, bodily harm. Patients always have the right for autonomy of what's best for them. Disclosure will include information for patient to make a choice. Obviously, this is what we were, I just alluded to. Institutions have a policy or procedure, have an identifiable legal form or document that everyone, as a nurse, you'll look for to make sure that that is there. Duty to disclose, conflicts of interest, diagnosis. These are all things. This is there to make sure that you don't have a physician that stands to gain by doing a certain procedure, even if that's not in the best interest of that patient. We've all seen that even with medication. Sometimes there will be certain drug rep things that feel like they're a little under the table of, now we're going to all prescribe everybody this medication. Whether it's maybe not the best thing for them, we're still going to prescribe that. And that's what we need to watch for as we advocate for nurses as well. Make sure there's not a conflict of interest of, why is this patient getting this procedure? Does that seem to be in the best interest of them? And if the family members need to get involved because there's the patient's not able to make an informed consent themselves, then we need to do that. But we need to make sure all questions are answered and that it's in the best interest of the patient, or the patient is knowingly choosing based off of the information that he or she has available. Okay, negligent resuscitation, duty of reasonable disclosure and quality of life, treatment without consent, results in a lawsuit, assault, if there's a threat, battery of actual physically touching, obtaining consent under duress, prudent action, so DNR, identified advocate. So this is where you have a power of attorney, you have someone that's going to speak for you in the event you're not able to speak for yourself. You always want to err on the side of life. There are some, just know that DNRs is something that you may have a DNR in one instance, you're taking care of a patient. They may come back at another time and maybe their prognosis has been altered and they may now not have the DNR. So know that those things can change, and you need to always If you don't know, err on the side of life. But as a reasonable, prudent nurse, you want to be aware of these. If you're in a situation, working on a unit where this is something, you want to be aware of that when you're starting your shift. You want to know the status on each of your patients. So in the event that there is a life-saving event that needs to take place, that you know the patient and the family's wishes. Documentation of the nurse creates an audit trail. You want to cover your bases. Again, cover your bases. Everything that you do for that patient, document in a clear and concise manner, free of opinions, accurate and in a timely manner. Documenting, just you look through that yourself. These are just most frequent allegations of nursing malpractice or negligence. Malpractice and negligence are sometimes used simultaneously. So that kind of wrapped it up. It's about 55 minutes, just shy of an hour here for a PowerPoint. So I appreciate you listening to that. I have virtual office hours on Thursdays from 8 a.m. until noon, and then I have class in the afternoon. Pop in if you have any questions whatsoever. Love to talk legal, love to talk any of this. If there's anything that you want to dive a little deeper, just hop into one of my office hours and I would love to discuss it with you. But welcome to fall of 2020, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.